Hi, I'm Kevin Keller, the pragmatic statistician. In a previous episode of Street Stats, we spoke about using stages in statistical process control, or SPC, but there was an important situation that we left out. Now, we are in the world of using SPC to control our process in a very classic way. This particular scenario is largely philosophical, and that is, when should I change my limits? And there are several scenarios. Now, procurement people writing quality standards will tell you to review the limits at least once per year. Now, this is absolute silliness. It has no concept of understanding what goes on in the real world. And sadly, it's propagated by a few professionals, mostly out of innocence because they don't have experience in SPC, but they are proficient in teaching Lean Six Sigma concepts. Now, if you are doing a great job of process control, you are looking at charts every day and making the right decision about recalculating limits at the appropriate time. It might be less than a year, might be more than a year. As one who would get audited and couldn't talk specific procurement people off the ledge, and sadly, some hard headed quality professionals as well, we would update the dates on our limits to appease them. It added no value to our world since we were already doing a fairly decent job to begin with, checking the proverbial box without additional value. But it made the auditors happy. Now, here's why. A procurement person can't tell you whether or not you're actually doing a good job or not. They don't know what to ask for, they don't know what to look for. So if you aren't doing a great job, if you have updated the limits annually, then you haven't completely ignored it. But it really isn't understanding SPC. But let's say you have your own policies and are recalculating. So it's still a little flawed, but here's some things to consider. Now, we're going to do an example here where the process has not changed significantly. Since the topic that started all of this was stages, we're going to use stages to do the calculations for us. So I'm going to go to Engine Room, and I'm going to show the data real quick. I've kind of brought over my favorite variable on-time shipping, and there it is in column G, on-time shipping. And I'm going to plot that out. I'm going to do a control chart. And we will do on-time shipping. I got a thunderstorm outside. There's my variable. And I'm just going to calculate using all of the data. And so there's my results. And so I have an average of 90.1, and my average range is 2.5%. All right. So, you might say, well, it's drifted a little bit, but overall looks pretty stationary. So now, what would happen if I did that same thing, but I recalculated the limits every 2 years? What might happen? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to drag my on-time shipping, my month, and this time I'm going to drag in my new limits. I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to use this first stage limits for my entire chart. And the reason I'm going to do that is that's what I had pretty much in the first example, but we're going to be able to see, do things change a lot? And so it gives me my summary statistics. My average was 90.8. It was 90, 89. So maybe it's drifted down a little bit. Maybe. All right. So, is that really significant? And I would suggest probably not. All right. So hopefully that was helpful a little bit. So if your process hasn't changed significantly, don't change the limits. But sometimes there are significant changes in your process. So let's deal with the easy one first. Your process gets much better. Now, sometimes you changed it, sometimes you don't know exactly what happened. So we're going to go to engine room and we're going to go back to our data. And again, we used this in the previous example where we're looking at our data shifting upwards. And so I'm going to use my my on-time shipping, grab the month, it's good discipline. And this time I'm going to use my stage one up, but I'm going to use the first stage limits for the entire thing. So now all of a sudden, all of these points are out of control. Should I change? Absolutely. Now, here's the deal. I don't know what happened. I have no clue what happened, but it did. All right. Doesn't mean I shouldn't change the limits. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you a definition of entropy. Entropy is a lack of order or predictability, and most importantly, it's a gradual decline into disorder. And if you listen to a lot of instructors, they say this is the worst thing that can happen. And so, what if entropy changed your process? And so, we're going to go back to engine room. We're going to look at another example where things get worse. So I'm going to go back to my control charts. And this time I have modified, whoops, it's still thinking. There we go. All right. I got too quick there. And so we're just going to go ahead and we're going to use all of the data to calculate this. And we can see that the process has declined over time. Now, it's a huge no, but it's definitely changed. And so we're going to modify this particular example. And we are going to go to on-time shipping. And this time I'm going to put in, oops, there. I'm going to, oh, wrong one. Let's try this again. How about modified? How about that? And then I'm going to put in new limits. And I'm going to show you what it would have looked like for this data had we used the first stage limits the entire way. Now, what's happening over time is that this process is starting to degrade. Now, it's not huge, but it's degrading. And what you often pick up in SPC class is, oh my gosh, we have to go chase down these points. What happened here? And the team members laugh at you and they go, you don't know what you're talking about. And so the big question becomes, do we recalculate the limits for this process? And I'm going to submit, yes, you do. So let's talk about this a bit. In this particular case, I don't know what the root cause is. And some of you will say, no, if you change the limits, then you are giving in and allowing your process to be worse by not fixing the process. I agree. That's quite true. The variation is now worse than it was. A few of you might add, you need to have those team members take action on those points, apply the brakes. Here's where you and I have a hard disagree. The team members can't do diddly squat about fixing the process. Now, diddly squat's old school for zip, not a nothing. The process must be redesigned to achieve better performance. Now, the team members can affect where that average might be centered, but they can't do anything about variation. If you don't change the limits, then you are setting yourself up for one of two bad cultures. One bad culture You tell the team members to adjust the process and they actually listen. Now, in this particular case, on time shipping, higher is better, but sometimes we want a target value. And you learned in SPC class that you don't touch the process if the mean is stationary. You actually make your output worse, more variable. That's bad. Now, I have found that team members are much smarter than we are. It's because we didn't do our job well as management, we create the far worse culture. The team members realize the helplessness of the situation. They don't take action when there are alarms. They know if they wait until the next data point, it'll be fine. You are developing a culture that never reacts to alarms. It takes years to fix. It's the boy who cried wolf. Now, when the process is really wrong, no one reacts. You get the plant manager or the director or the vice president asking you, did the point alarm? Yes, you answer quickly. Then they ask, did the team members respond? No, you answer quickly, happy to deflect blame. Now, if you're savvy, you keep your mouth closed after that, because if you state that they never respond, that culture falls back on you or some other member of management. But management is clearly to blame in this scenario. So, what do? Change the limits. Tell the team members they respond to all alarms. Then, as a management team, ask the following question: do we care? Sometimes that variation matters, sometimes it doesn't. Don't be theoretical, don't be rigid. Statistics quantifies the risk in making decisions. Schuhart was brilliant in balancing type 1 and type 2 errors in a business setting through the limit calculations. But it doesn't excuse our job to understand the risk to our business if we don't take action. If it's nothing, then don't fix the process. If it's important, redesign the process. Let me reiterate, statistics quantifies the risk in making a decision. You as business leaders are responsible for asking and answering the question. If the process has changed, regardless of whether you understand the root cause or not, change the limits and then challenge that new state. So be careful out there. The streets are messy and so is data. But remember, there's always a way.